we had another mass killing, this time again, well, I should say again, of elementary school children, 19 of whom were shot to death by an 18-year-old man who, young man, I guess, who purchased a couple of semi-automatic weapons as soon as he turned 18, which was, I guess, within the past month or so, and then shot his grandmother, 66-year-old woman who realized he was leaving the house fully armed for some reason, and then drove his vehicle toward an elementary school. It's unclear whether he was specifically targeting the elementary school, although it really appears he was. But, we still don't have full information on any of this stuff. Crashed his vehicle and then was somehow confronted by at least some police officers at that point as he was entering the school. Got into the school, killed 19 children, killed a teacher, and then was confronted by border security guards who were in the area and were brought in because they had more tactical gear. Apparently the shooter wounded at least one police officer on his way in, wounded a couple of these others, and then was killed himself. Again, after killing 19 kids ranging from, I think, 10 and 11 years old, 9-year-olds. Still also multiple children injured, wounded in the hospital. They have identified the killer. His name is Salvador Ramos. Apparently was bullied as a child, and but very difficult to assess, what's going on there. There were initial reports that he had body armor. It appears that he did not. And everything else, I mean, I've been doing this iteration of the show for 12 years. 2 years after the Heller case, where all bets were off in terms of gun control. And I cannot tell you how many times we've done this. I was just talking to Matt before the show. We used to have Cliff Schechter on the program regularly. He worked for a anti-gun organization years ago. And there were times where it seemed like every third week we would be talking about a mass shooting incident. And literally, as I'm looking through the stories and the sound, it's all the same. It's all the same.
It's super eerie, too, Matt also made a great point when we were chatting before the show about how there is such a crossover, too, with the shooters and violence against women and having that kind of history. And in Sandy Hook, the shooter there was targeting his mother, right? Female relative, if I'm not mistaken. This shooter also it seems, shot his grandmother.
Yeah, and it's unclear as to whether, that was part of the plan, or she said don't go, or whatever it was. But the details are going to change. The small details are going to be changed. The thing that's identical is the reaction. Joe Manchin out there, I don't know why we can't have a sensible gun. Well, of course you do. The guy started his campaign for Senate by taking an AR-15 and shooting at a cap and trade bill. If you really were running against the cap and trade bill, which of course he was, you could have just burned it. But no, you had to. You wanted the weapon there because it showed how strong you were. It showed how big your member was.
In the same breath, he says that he doesn't want to do anything to the filibuster to make that sensible gun reform happen.
Of course.
So nothing will.
Of course. It's a joke.
And the Senate wants to go on Memorial Day vacation, so, right, there's priorities here.
And look, the fact of the matter is that the American public, even those who are in favor of gun control, they don't put that as their top priority when they vote. I mean, I don't. And we know from the data that most people do not. The people who put it as their top priority are the people who want to buy more and more guns. Because we know in this country, and the number of guns have just exploded. I mean, it's just unbelievable. There's supposedly 15 million more guns that were bought because of the pandemic. And the number of gun owners has not grown particularly that much. It is just that the gun owners themselves just keep buying more and more guns. There's been some expansion of the number of gun owners, but not commensurate with the number of guns that have been sold. And I want to make this clear because, at one point, and yesterday we were talking about the different rulings from the Supreme Court in terms of eviscerating the ability for our government to really govern, to eviscerate the administrative and regulatory state. We will see the Supreme Court reverse an individual right for people to get an abortion that has existed in this country for 50 years. That is probably a month away, maybe less. We saw the Supreme Court basically say your right to an effective defense in a capital punishment case, when where the state's going to execute you, basically ends if you can't get a good attorney to prove that you had a bad attorney in the first place. So it's really sort of a really hollow right that is specifically enumerated, we should say, in the Constitution, the Sixth Amendment. And for 230 some odd years of our country's history, there was no fundamental right for the individual to carry a firearm. You had the ability to do it in many states, but the government had a right to had the ability to encumber that right. Here's a piece from the Smithsonian Magazine. This is from 2018. Gun control is as old as the Old West. This is the frontier. It's part of the country. This took place, in the 1880s. Dodge City, 1878. Scroll down.
Yeah, Wyatt Earp was enforcing gun control.
Tombstone, Arizona. Tombstone's not Arizona, but you had all sorts of Dodge City, Albany, whatever it is. You enter the town, you got to disarm. You either do it at a hotel or the local lawman's office. This is just an example. They had it in colonial times too, on saying how you had to store your gun in your house. Probably 100 years before this. There is a long history, to the extent that this country has existed, of gun control in this country. But in 2008, 5 conservative justices decided that's over. I mean, go back to the Burger Court what did Warren Burger say? And this is,
And while you're finding that, just to point out, the laws of tombstones that require visitors to disarm at a hotel or lawman's office, those are still live at the NRA conference that's happening in Houston over the weekend, where Donald Trump's going to be speaking, where guns are not going to be allowed.
Well, yeah, the idea that you shouldn't bring guns into certain places, you're an idiot. The only idiots, and the NRA is not stupid. They understand. But the question is, like, whether the government can abridge that right, or where did that right come from? It was created by a 5-4 court in 2008 in the Heller case. Here's Warren Burger, who was Chief Justice in, the 50s, I think it was. The gun lobby's interpretation of the Second Amendment is one of the greatest pieces of fraud, I repeat the word fraud, on the American people by special interest groups that I have ever seen in my lifetime. The real purpose of the Second Amendment was to ensure that state armies, the militia, would be maintained for the defense of the state. The very language of the Second Amendment refutes any argument that it was intended to guarantee every citizen an unfettered right to any kind of weapon he or she desires. And we know this. We know this because why can't you have a tank? Why can't you own a Stinger missile? Because we know it's really just like
where
the state has the right to practice. Yeah. And I mentioned this, which is not to say, like, look, the Supreme Court. I did an interview yesterday with William Forbath and Joseph Fishkin. They wrote a book called The Anti-Oligarchy Constitution, Reconstructing the Economic Foundations of Democracy. Well, it may come up in our conversation with Harvey Kaye and Alan Minsky. But the point is that they're talking in terms of redistribution, in terms of wealth. But the fact of the matter is, Supreme Court is a political body. It has always been a political body. How quickly it responds to politics is a little bit slower because president appoints them, Senate confirms them, unless, of course, it was Mitch McConnell and Barack Obama. And this right is ultimately a function of our democracy. It's a warped version of democracy because the same Supreme Court also allows for unfettered expenditures. And so the NRA buys this. And again, it's also one of those situations where the gun nuts, and I do mean nuts, they vote on this basis. The Republican Party is organized around it. It's not exclusively the function of the Republican Party. Again, we'll play this audio from Nancy Pelosi doing a robocall for an NRA-backed Henry Cuellar. I get it. She wants to maintain her majority in the House. We won't. Unlikely, and certainly, but you can't really do anything about these issues if you're going to expend that much energy re-electing someone who is so closely aligned with the
from the NRA.
In the NRA, but this is a right that was created almost whole cloth by the Supreme Court. We know this because for 240 years of our country's existence, the Supreme Court, and I think everyone understands that there were large periods of time where the Supreme Court was they wouldn't even allow, let's be clear, the Lochner era. We can say the Lochner era. That was the Supreme Court saying to the state of New York, you cannot limit the number of hours that workers work. They wouldn't allow child labor laws. There have been plenty of times in this country where the Supreme Court has been completely reactionary. We're at that point again. So if they wanted to, or they felt that it was obvious that there was an unfettered right to have weapons in this country, they would have ruled that way. But they didn't because they didn't. It was just in 2008. That's when that right appeared all of a sudden. So people should be aware of that because, it's just another example of the importance of the judiciary in our system. I don't mean that one should have esteem for it. I just mean that you should be aware of it. The same way that, like, you don't have to have esteem for a pothole, but you should be aware of it when you're driving down the street so that you don't, destroy your car, particularly one that is this deep and wide. And, so here we are, like, we have clips that we can play.
Let's do it. I mean,
but they're like literally like, I don't know. It's just a different guy saying them.
You could put it any year, basically.
No kidding.
Next to these.
Seriously.
These
it's the worst version of Groundhog Day ever.